Joining me today, MSNBC political analyst and executive editor of MSNBC.com, our favorite import from the United Kingdom, Richard Wolff, and former DNC communications director and MSNBC political analyst, the lovely Karen Finney. All even with one to go. The new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll finds President Obama and Governor Romney are tied among likely voters at 47% as the two candidates head into their final debate tonight. Last month, the president led by 5 points. At this point in 2004, President Bush and Senator John Kerry were also all tied up. Will this election end up favoring the incumbent as it did in 2004? This latest poll shows both candidates have paths to victory. Governor Romney has made demographic inroads. The president's lead among women is down 8%, the lowest it has been this cycle. And Governor Romney holds a 10-point lead among men. The president's support among white voters is down to 36%, 7% below the share of white voters who supported him in 2008. But on the economy, the centerpiece of Governor Romney's campaign, voters have more confidence that the nation is on the road to recovery. 41% of voters say the country is headed in the right direction, the highest number recorded by this poll in 3 years. A plurality of voters believe the economy will get better over the next year, while just 9% say it will get worse, the lowest number in decades. The president could get an additional boost from the final state unemployment report right before the election, released last Friday. The jobless rate fell in 41 states, including every swing state except for Virginia and New Hampshire, which stayed the same. Over the past year, the state unemployment rate has fallen by more than a full point in Nevada, Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. But if anything is clear in this race, it's the lack of clarity, which is to say anything could happen. Writing today, Peggy Noonan sums it up. Nobody's sleeping. That's the real political headline now. Nobody working in the campaigns is sleeping. There are 349 hours until the last poll closes on election night. And for both sides, there is not a minute to waste. Joining us now from Boca Raton, Florida, is Emmy Darling and the game changer himself, MSNBC political analyst and New York Magazine national affairs editor, John Heilemann. John, always good to see you.
Alex, great to see you, too. We're here in the Sunshine State, but, of course, the greatest source of sunshine in our world is not here. We miss you in Boca Raton.
Oh, just buttering me up. I will take it, however. John, we've talked. I mean, there may be Romnesia on the campaign trail. There's also a certain amount of amnesia in the National Press Corps, which is to say we knew this thing was going to be tight. That said, given the economy improving and a distinctly rosier outlook, if you believe the polls, are you surprised that the race is as close as it is, given how much improvement there's been on the unemployment numbers?
Well, certainly the fact that the economy is improving is good news for President Obama, but it's not improving that dramatically in terms of the unemployment numbers have dropped a little bit below 8%. The president still is weighed down by the fact that only happened a month ago, and he had 4 years where the unemployment picture was stubbornly bad. We also are not seeing wages rising. We're not seeing GDP growth surging. It's not like we're on the verge of a big boom. What we're seeing is green shoots in terms of the economic outlook going forward. You know, the most compelling number in the NBC Wall Street Journal poll was one you didn't mention, although a lot of those numbers are really interesting, the ones you did mention. But it was the one that had 2/3 of voters saying that they wanted to see dramatic change from President Obama if he gets reelected.
We were actually saving that number for a little later in the discussion, but perhaps we can show our audience at home that full screen that we have prepared, because there are no oversights on this television program show. Continue on, John, with your point about the major changes in the second term.
I just think that it goes directly to your question. Is the reason I raised it is I think, President Obama, there's no question that people feel that the economy has turned a corner and that there's an increasing amount of confidence about the economic outlook. I don't think that is not translating into a big bump for President Obama, partly because he hasn't really laid out a very specific set of policy agenda items for a second term, and people still feel as though Washington's not working right. They blame President Obama for that. They blame Republicans for that. But generally, they're frustrated with the overall state of how economic policy making is working on their behalf, even if they're a little bit more optimistic about the economy. So there's still a lot of questions about what President Obama plans to do in his next term, and still a lot of discomfort over the last 4 years.
Let's talk about that question of whether the president has painted a compelling enough picture of what he would do in his second term. And I want to read a quote from E.J. Dionne, who offers a defense, if you will, of the president's next 4 years if he does, in fact, get reelected. He says, Romney's 5-point plan sounds good, but it is quite vague. Obama, by contrast, has been far more straightforward about what he would do about the deficit. He wants a budget deal that includes both spending cuts and tax increases. He has put forward rather detailed deficit reduction proposals. To disagree with some of Obama's specifics is to acknowledge that the specifics exist, Richard.
Yeah, I mean, he actually has put forward several jobs plans. Yeah. They may not have gone anywhere with the Republican Congress, but that's a statement of fact. His deficit proposals, I remember seeing these big wadges of paper with deficit-cutting proposals. So, look, I understand that a lot of people want things to change. Among the people who want a dramatic change for the president if he gets a second term are a bunch of Democrats. Those numbers conflate all sorts of people who want Washington to change and want this president to change, whether there are people who want him to completely reverse or be more successful on his current track. But just because people keep saying there are no specifics doesn't mean to say the conventional wisdom is actually true.
But I also really disagree and take issue with this idea that he hasn't put forward a vision, because you could make the argument. I went back and I reread the State of the Union speech from earlier this year. There is a very clear vision. He talks about infrastructure spending. He talks yet again about reducing dependence on foreign oil and increasing our sources of domestic energy production, and how that's an investment that he wants to continue to the future. Why? So that we can be more competitive in the global economy and those jobs don't go off to China. So, I mean, there is a whole both domestic and foreign policy and economic agenda that he's laid out and he's talked about again and again and again. And I feel like simply because the Republicans say that's not a vision, you know, the other piece of the vision when he talks about, and I sometimes I think they're tone deaf to this, the idea of a country where people get a fair shot and a fair shake and all of that, and where everybody, I mean, when Mitt Romney says he's for the 100%, that's a talking point. But when Obama's talking about, he's also talking about women, brown people, low-income people. He's not just sort of using it as a talking point. There's actually sort of a social civil rights policy agenda underneath that as well that I think he's also speaking to and not getting credit for.
Well, John, let's talk about the women issue, because you have a column out this week, or I guess it's Monday. It came out last weekend. In terms of the support that the president is losing among women, which I think is surprising to a lot of folks given the lead that he has. He's up by 8 points. But you make the point that if the first debate set the president back significantly and importantly with any group of the electorate, it's the so-called waitress moms, the white working class women in swing states, and that effectively those are the women he needs to get back and get back quickly if he's going to win this thing.
Yes, and I'll just say one thing quickly to the previous points. I totally agree with Richard and with Karen. I don't think it's that the president hasn't had jobs proposals or hasn't had deficit-cutting proposals, but the bottom line is that most people of undecided voters, they don't feel like that, like they understand them. I mean, it's a political failure. If he has those plans, he's not really actively campaigning on them, and voters aren't hearing them with the degree of clarity they would need to in order to act on them. On the question of the waitress moms and white blue-collar women, President Obama had been overperforming in the swing states with that group of voters for most of the year. After the Denver debate, Governor Romney started to make gains with that group. President Obama still has a lead with that group, but he's not overperforming in the way that he was a month ago. And if you look at where Governor Romney has made gains systematically across the board over the course of the last month, it really is mostly with that group. And it's fascinating because you have two really different contrasting views about how to talk to that group of voters between the two campaigns. And they're both totally plausible. President Obama has focused on Planned Parenthood, has focused on the Lilly Ledbetter Act. Those are issues that are social issues that have an economic component, both of them. Lilly Ledbetter, it's a justice issue. It's also a pocketbook issue. Planned Parenthood is a women's issue, also a pocketbook issue. And those issues poll very well for him, and they show up in they show up in focus groups as doing very well for him. Governor Romney's response to that is to say, none of that, all this stuff, those are issues, those are women's specific issues. I think what moves white working class women is the broader economic argument. Is President Obama coming up with the jobs plan that works? And secondly, is he addressing gas prices, which cuts with that voter group? And they are competing for that same group, just with a very different theory of the case.
The one thing, Karen, I want to go to you, but I thought this was surprising in the stats that we have from the NBC News Wall Street Journal poll is the importance of choice and the question of abortion, which 40% of those of the respondents said they were more likely to vote for a pro-choice candidate. 28% said they were more likely to vote for a pro-life candidate. 31% said it made no difference. In 2005, it was 35% for pro-choice, 32% for pro-life. This is more of an issue now. So to the degree that the Obama campaign is bringing the social, that it's a hybrid sort of strategy, both economic and social, that would seem to be a good thing based on these respondents.
But again, I'm going to disagree with John because I think part of the mistake that the Romney campaign is making is trying to get women to dissect these issues so that we actually vote against our own self-interest. Because for women, these are economic issues, and these aren't just socialist. And frankly, the tone of the conversation over the last year, talking about redefining rape and legitimate rape and all of these kinds of things, has really been an insult to women, and particularly.
And one had largely on the right and respond on the right.
And also this question about birth control, which many women, thought, well, wait a second, we resolved that. And I have to tell you, I was in Kansas and Missouri last week, and even conservative women were disgusted with the binders comment. So I'm not sure that I think these national numbers are reflecting what's really going on with women, because when you look at the state-by-state numbers, even the Gallup data from last week show, this is now with a third or fourth poll that shows issues about choice and access to contraception. I mean, those are higher issues that people are going to vote on than the economy. And I don't know that these national numbers are really capturing that. I can tell you, as a board member for NARAL Pro-Choice America, we've identified 238,000 women in battleground states, 25 key counties. This is the issue that they're going to vote on, and they're going to be voting for Obama.
Before we go to a break here, Richard, the other thing, this is always, these sort of personality questions are always very, very interesting to me. In terms of the connecting and the likability question, President Obama is trouncing Mitt Romney 57 to 25% on the easygoing, likable question. Yep. Same with compassion and understanding average people. Obama's 53, Romney's 29. But when we come to commander-in-chief, it's much, much more narrow. Obama is at 44%. Romney is at 41%.
Well, look, for a start, anyone's likability numbers can hold up under 8% unemployment and hundreds of millions of dollars of negative advertising. There's something there, right? So at this point, that's not going to change. I suspect the debate tonight is going to move things around on that commander-in-chief question because, Mitt Romney just hasn't had to explain a number of contradictory positions he's had on national security. I will say, though, it's a race against time. The fundamentals of this race are about the economy. All those economic numbers, including gas prices that John was talking about, they're coming down. Unemployment, gas prices, the two biggest things that drive opinion poll numbers. So, how quick is that going to happen over the next couple of weeks? How much is the president going to stabilize his own confidence in terms of enthusiasm among his base? We just don't know. And this debate is just another data point along the way.
John, your partner in crime, dare I call him that, Mark Halperin, said that those numbers about the connecting and the likability in a story today, that is very good news for the president, or good news. I would never want to paraphrase Mark Halperin. He's very exact with all of his language. Do you agree on that?
Yeah, sure. I think those have always been. The president's always had a real advantage over Governor Romney in terms of that on that issue. Governor Romney managed to at least get his favorable and unfavorables into the positive, a net positive category after the Denver debate for the first time really in his entire 6 years of running for president. So he's always suffered as not being a particularly likable candidate. As I say, he's a little bit more likable in the electorate now. President Obama still has a big advantage there, and it's always been one of his key assets going forward. And I think it'll continue to be a key asset for him. But to Richard's point, there are two different races against time going on here. One is that the economy is getting better, and that helps President Obama. The other is right now Governor Romney has a lot of momentum in a lot of states. And if you read a lot of the reporting that's coming out right now, the Obama campaign is playing is really on defense right now. It might be a defensive strategy that works, but they're looking at firewalls now. The race is increasingly coming down to Ohio. Governor Romney's slowly making gains in Ohio. President Obama still has the advantage there, but you look around at where the president's going to be. He's in Colorado. He's in Nevada. He's in Iowa. He's in Wisconsin. Those are firewall states, and a part of the race against time is not just a race against time from the Romney side as to when economic conditions kick in favor of the president, but can President Obama outlast what is clearly right now a momentum shift that has gone and have been running in Governor Romney's direction for the past couple of weeks?
The race against time has caught up with us, my friend, and we have to say thank you and good afternoon to you. But thank you, as always, for your time and insight, John Heilemann, Emmy Darling.
Toodaloo.
After the break, Who knew foreign policy would play such a definitive role in the run-up to November? Between the thin red line in Iran and the attack in Libya, Bob Schieffer will have plenty to discuss. We will talk foreign concepts with former Assistant Secretary of State P.J. Crowley. That's coming up next on Now.